You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome, everyone, to the Capitalist Corner on this, well, for me, it's cold Friday, but I imagine for Jim, it's an actually, very warm
It's been in
Friday.
the 80 here in Southern California. It's been in the 80s during the day this week. So I've been, taking my shirt off and getting a little sun out there. My dermatologist may not like that, but yeah, it's been nice and pleasant and warm. How about you, Michael?
Well, right now it's 21 degrees, and this is actually a warmer sort of situation that we got going on. So that's nice. Just to get everybody know, remember, we do super chats, super stickers. They're very, very much appreciative. And by all means, tune in at 2:30 today for Everyday Ethics with myself and the wonderful Persephone, who has brought more to the program than I could have ever hoped for.
What a wise lady she is. I double down.
She's great, yeah. I don't know if I should boost her ego this much, but I'm going to. So I submit my episodes sometimes for analysis to Claude, the AI, what is better. And it actually said to me yesterday, for this program, the show got considerably better once Persephone joined.
Well, Claude has a point. Because it's one thing when you have one talking head sort of talking at you, even when you're answering questions and stuff, it's much a different dynamic. And I think much more interesting to the audience when you've got people bouncing. And she's being a very thoughtful, wise person. So when she makes a point or asks a question, it's really enhances the whole program, I think. So do check it out, people.
Look at this. I don't know what carpet pecunium means, but I'll take it, whatever it is. It's some Latin thing I'm sure Jim knows about from back when he was in high school. And Latin
carpet
was mandatory.
or carpe?
I don't know what it is, but it's there and it's $10 and I'm
Seize money.
Carpe. Oh, I would have got it if it was carpe because I know what carpe is.
Right, and pecunium, where we get pecuniary interest.
Yes.
And just learn your Latin roots there, my friend. And at least
either way, thank you so much,
okay,
Jenna. That's what's important is the thank you. So we got a rather in-depth topic I want to discuss, Jim. But first, I want to get into. I woke up this morning, 2:30 a.m. Tried to get back to sleep, could not. So, about 3:30, I decided to get up, and that's when I just started blasting you with the articles that were coming your way, of course.
And you completely ruined my morning, by the way, depressing me first thing in the morning.
So we got a question from Rock I'm going to address before we move on to the next topic, but I want to talk about this first. So I come across this post on X, it looks like it's something shared from Truth Social, Donald Trump's platform, and it's his profile or feed, whatever, and it's a picture of Barack and Michelle Obama with their heads on the body of monkeys, obviously a very, very racist thing. And I'm saying this can't be right. So, and I can't stand Trump, but even I thought, no, this can't be right. So I took the image and I went and I posted Grok and I said, fact check this for me. Is this real? And it said, no, it appears to be. It was not real. It's not in any of the news. So I said, okay, but I still want to do a deeper dive. So I went to Trump's Truth Social page and I scrolled down and you don't see anything there. So I'm thinking, okay, this isn't right. But then I went back to the original post on X and it said, you have to watch the video. So then I went back into Truth Social. Now this is, I'm relaying it very quick, but this is about an hour of which I'm checking on ChatGPT, I'm checking on Claude, I'm checking on Grok, I'm trying to verify if this is real or not. And lo and behold, I get into Trump's profile and I scroll to the video and I hit play and I watched all the way through. And at the end, there is this image depicted of Barack and Michelle dancing and, dressed like monkeys. Still, I said, well, maybe this is a fake. So I went in and I said, is this his actual account? And yes, it's his actual account. Now, Jim, look, I've already seen it this morning, the excuses. Well, an intern must have posted that. That's not actually him. The intern's already fired. Let it go. I'm sorry. That might fly for your teenage child. Maybe your teenage child shared something that the child shouldn't have. The president of the United States, I'm sorry, no. And the thing is, whoever posted it thought it would be okay. And there's a reason that they think it's okay. So anyways, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, first at the last there, what you said, even if it was just an aide, and even if the guy was immediately fired, think of the kind of people that Trump has working as aides. They really did not have any judgment to stop this. Well, Trump is called, white people monkeys. That does not excuse the obvious racist implications of this. And even if it is just an aide, but besides, it's on Truth Social. He is the president. He is responsible for everything that goes out. And he is certainly responsible for everything that his aides do. He should do more than simply fire the guy assuming he didn't know about it. But given his psychology, how am I supposed to know he didn't know about it and approve it himself?
Right.
I don't believe what their aides say at the White House.
Right. The interesting thing is, when I went through his feed on Truth Social, post after post is about election fraud from 2020.
The man
and that's what this video is actually
mentally
about.
Obsessed. He admits it though. He's got ego issues. It's all about his ego. So he's got a very bad case of obsession disorder with this 2020 election.
Speaking of obsession, Jorge Posada, who's very anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, I should say, anti-Zionist. I've met him a couple times. Nice guy, got along with him. Disagree with him on Israel, but when I posted this, like, something goes wrong in people's minds, Jim. I don't know. Like, I posted this Trump video, and I said, anybody from MAGA want to defend this? So Jorge, again, whom I get along with, like, he comes in and he says, this is absolutely deplorable, but it has to be understood in the context of Zionism. And it's just, I just said to him, you're obsessed. Like, something's broken when everything you see comes back to the one issue that you're caring about. A big thing for me is individual rights, right? I don't see a car commercial and say, aha, they're trying to screw people over to take people's individual rights away. And then, I go to the beach, and some kid, he's running around with his beach ball. Oh, what's that beach ball going to be used for? To violate someone's rights? He's going to hit somebody with it. But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's just, but I see this happen a lot. And a friend of mine in prison told me one time, when I started to read the Bible, I had just been in prison maybe 9 months. And the guy told me, he said, I've seen more people, this guy had been in for 20 years at the time. He said, I've seen more people lose their minds over that book than anything else. And I've seen that where people, their minds just get locked and obsessed into something. And it scares me.
Yeah, everything is Zionism. Everything is the Jews. Now, that is an age-old obsession in various forms, but whether it's Jewish space lasers or Jews are using babies and ritually eating drinking their blood from medieval times, what they need is this other, to blame all their woes, all the problems of the world on. And so, and it cuts across, and there are even Jewish people who are willing to buy into even some of that degree of Jewish self-hatred. So, yeah, they need some, and it's dumb. They need some kind of obsessive excuse for everything.
Yeah, I mean,
must be the Jewish control of the media. The Rothschilds and the Trilateral Commission and the Bohemian Grove, and they're controlling media. And don't you know? It makes it easy. Yeah. How easy it is to coast in life when you've got that kind of pseudo explanation for anything and everything.
Right, and the thing is, I'm a critic of U.S. aid to Israel and everybody, right? but when you make everything about that, you take away from any legitimate arguments that you might have. It's like the guy who calls racism on everything. And then you detract from when there's an actual case of racism. So anyway, so here's we're going to move on now. Not really a good segue, but whatever. Rock Chartrand, first of all, Rock, thank you so much for the $10. He asked me, what is my view of forced labor for prisoners? Are rights forfeited by those who violate the rights of others? Should the innocent be forced to subsidize the lives of the guilty? Oh, God. This is one of those questions where it's a very difficult thing for me to assess, because in my ideal world, right? In my ideal world, all government would be financed voluntarily. There'd be far less people in prison. It would only be rights violators. The people that were giving their money to the government would understand this is a government function. Right now, we have the case where taxpayers' dollars are confiscated to pay for this, and we have many, many, many people in prison who haven't violated the rights of anybody. So when we're talking about how should a prison system run that's run by the government and that is completely funded by confiscated wealth, it makes me hesitant to answer. But this I will say, yes, I do think that people that violate the rights of others forfeit their rights. I mean, at a very basic level, they forfeit the right to be free.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's obvious. Do they forfeit? I mean, there's levels of rights, I think, that we would have to get into that. I mean, I honestly haven't thought about it in depth, but basically, I mean, I don't think inmates should be tortured or abused. So when you talk about forced labor, I would not be opposed. The first time I ever read about this was from Murray Rothbard. I think it was in Power and Market. And he suggested one way to fund the prison system in a completely private society would be to have inmates perform their own labor in order to pay for it. I'm not opposed on principle to that, but given the history of slavery, given the history of government abuse, I'm skeptical of it. I think that would be the sort of the best way I could put it. Now you ask, well, should the innocent be forced to subsidize the lives of the guilty? What the innocent should do is, if they're smart, pay for a system that reduces rights violations by, one, removing people who violate rights from the street, and you have to house them somewhere. But to say, should they subsidize their lives? Well, if you just throw them into a pit, say, you get a 3-year sentence, and we're just going to throw you somewhere where nobody's going to take care of you. It's a free-for-all in prison. And after 3 years, we're just going to let you out. You're going to be releasing animals. And so it's going to run contrary to what you're trying to do. So it is absolutely in the interest of the people footing the bill to have functioning prison systems that incapacitate, punish, deter, and rehabilitate. Okay, now I go to the great Jim Valiant.
Well, the idea is, of course, much older than Murray Rothbard. Murray Rothbard just puts it into a voluntary financing context. But consider the 13th Amendment, which makes slavery unlawful. It says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States, except as a punishment for a crime, where you're duly convicted. And consider the Due Process Clause itself. It says no one shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. It also says in the 8th Amendment, neither, no cruel and unusual punishments or excessive bail. So let me suggest a couple of implications that come directly from that. You do lose certain rights, and I'm going to say it just that precisely. You lose certain rights. If you're in there, say, for a 3-year sentence for a series of, modest thefts, let's say, and you get a prison sentence of 3 years, does that mean they can starve you, torture you, beat you, deny your right to appeal, allow you put you in some solitary hellhole, a pit? No. You do not lose all of your rights. you lose your right to, if you're a violent criminal, for example, it makes perfect sense to say you've lost, at least for a significant period of time, your right to walk around with other people because you're dangerous. So, I mean, the logic has to go, we have to punish you and we have to protect people. And if that's the primary thrust here, then you've lost your right, the same right of liberty. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things. States can take away your right to vote. And I think every jurisdiction now has the rule that you can't possess a firearm once you've been convicted of a felony, and that felony is not, stays on your record. You've lost your right to a firearm, and a variety of other things. So it's not as though I'm saying you have the same rights after a criminal conviction, especially a felony conviction. I'm saying you have a different order of rights. Certain rights are taken away, such as your right to walk around on the street, just for example. On the other hand, you don't lose all of your rights. Now, getting to do law-abiding people have to pay for this? Well, if they have to pay for police, then it's the same thing. What we're doing is we're paying for people to deal with criminals, rights violators, and you are paying for in effect, the misdeeds of violators, because we wouldn't need police themselves. So all law enforcement functions are something we pay for. It's like paying for insurance, Rock. Let me look at it that way. So in principle, I wouldn't be opposed to saying, well, the ordinary, and I believe in totally voluntary financing, but I would look at it like insurance. I'm paying for this thing to protect myself. It's a kind of insurance policy that I don't get subjected to more criminal activity. And so am I willing to pay for insurance? You're darn right. Does it matter whether whether it's an earthquake, a fire, a flood that I'm insuring myself against? Well, versus a person? No. In other words, this person who initiates force is a phenomenon that I need to pay for if I want to live in a rights-free world. So the point is, criminals are a reality, Rock, and just like earthquakes and floods are. And that reality is something that the productive people out there, the peaceful people out there need to pay for. Now, in principle, am I against prison industries? But after reading your book, the thing's a massive corruption. So color me massively skeptical. When the government runs these things, and now let's go back further in history, the chain gangs. I mean, there's a horrific history of abuse. There's a horrific history of, go look it up, people. Go look up the history of people incarcerated being forced to do labor. It is an invitation to government abuse. It's an invitation to, but though am I opposed to recouping some of this money for law enforcement and especially prisons from the labor of inmates? If you're going to do it, you've got to have massive oversight. You have to make sure, given the horrific history of prison labor, you've got to make sure that there's no abuses like that. And even in our so-called modern era, just read the works of Mr. Michael Liebowitz, and you'll get an idea of just how massively corrupt this stuff can be.
Yes, read the works of Michael Liebowitz, specifically Down the Rabbit Hole, How the Culture of Corrections Encourages Crime by Brent McCall and Michael Liebowitz. Race Jacobson, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. He says that how often do you hear about Trump deporting white illegals? We know they're getting in too from places like Russia. I don't hear about it at all.
I will say.
Well, I want to hold on. I want to say with the caveat though.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it's not happening, right?
Right.
Because the information is filtered through the media. And the media does like sensationalism. So it wouldn't surprise me if they chose to focus. I mean, like, for instance, there was a significant amount of, I think, South Koreans or North Koreans deported from, I want to say, South Carolina, somewhere down south. And we didn't hear anything about it because that doesn't fit the narrative. I understand they're not white. I'm just saying, but it doesn't fit the normal narrative of the shithole countries, that sort of thing.
I have a friend in Norway who is a big Ayn Rand fan, and he simply can't get into the United States. There's the anarchist Liquid Zulu who lives in Scotland. He can't move to New Hampshire as he wants to.
Right.
The point is that they've made it so hard for legal immigration as such. They've made such a ridiculous visa system. The system itself is Byzantine and horrible, but it's also, they don't allow the numbers in. So we have, they're not even, it's not a question of, say, well, on one side you can say, well, they're focused, for example, in deportations, but let's look at the issue in a broader way. Trump makes it difficult, and in fact, our immigration system in general makes it difficult for anybody to legally migrate to the United States. We have now, under Trump, we have net negative migration across the board. And so while he can have certain, and he's acute, when he has the Muslim countries or the terrorist countries ban, okay, you can focus on, hey, why are there these countries? But the point is, it's hard for anybody. It's hard for Northern Europeans to be legally migrate and get permanent residency in the United States. So it is a much, much broader issue, I think, in the immigration crowd. They want to jack up wages. They want to do all kinds of other things. They don't like, they took our job, kind of just the South Park thing. They don't like it, whether it's Norwegians or Scots taking their jobs. So when they have this broader economic issue, and they make it hellishly difficult to become a permanent legal resident.
Persephone's laughing. She doesn't realize when she does an American accent, that's how she sounds. Like Jim just sounded. Rock Chartrand, I just sent you a link to Amazon and on Facebook Messenger. All right, I want to get to this election stuff, Jim. So, Article 1, Section 4 of the United States Constitution reads, "The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the places of choosing senators." And also, I sent you the Federalist 59 where Hamilton discussed this. And clearly, a couple things popped out at me. Clearly, they wanted Congress to have the ultimate control over this. But, and this is where it's supposed to be for emergency situations, for very serious situations. And the reasoning isn't because a president's feelings are hurt. The reasoning is because they did not want states to be able to break up the union at whim. That is not what's happening here. So before we get into the Trump stuff, can you just explain a little bit about the law as relates to Article 1, Section 4?
Yeah, a lot of people have a misunderstanding, and especially it kicks in with presidential elections. We do not have a national election. There is no such thing as an election run, managed, and conducted by the United States government. Full stop. What we have are 50 state elections. This includes the president. The president is elected by the states through their delegations and to the electoral college. The states get to determine how that, we just happen to have popular elections in 50 states. The point is that the states get to determine how those electors are chosen. It used to be that the state legislatures chose senators and the state electors to the electoral college that determines the president. That's why they added that little proviso, except as to the senators. That sort of made archaic after we had an amendment to the Constitution that said senators can't just be picked by legislatures. They have to be picked by votes. So the direct election of senators sort of makes that an archaic little bit there. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the Constitution clearly says states are going to run the elections. They decide the times, manners, and places. Now, there are times when the federal government can come in and say, certain things have to be the same and uniform. So they can regulate and only regulate federal elections. If California, the election for the governor of California, the legislature of California, the state I live in, that's not something Congress, keep your nose out of that. When it comes to federal elections for House and Senate members, and presumably when they choose electors for the presidency, if they have popular elections, they can regulate elections. Now, House Bill number 1, when Biden came in, was an attempt to, in effect, federalize the elections and say, this is the way it's all got to be. And the Republicans for 4 years, The entire Republican Party was saying we don't want to federalize federal, elections. This is a state matter. And now what? And now we've got Mr. Trump saying we ought to federalize elections. These assholes wouldn't know a principle if it, bit them on the rear end. They will switch and this is the caution I would have for both sides. If you federalize elections, the parties change in power. They'll get pissed off at this party at some point and elect the other party in. And that's the thing Mr. Trump is obviously afraid of. If the tea leaves currently are, if the shadows, what does Dickens say in Christmas Carol? If the shadows of the present don't change, what will happen is a massive Democrat win come the midterm elections. And that's typically what happens in modern elections. Midterms go against the party in power. So Mr. Trump is doing everything he can to get their new election bill through. Now, are there certain election reforms that I might be in favor of from the federal level? Voter ID law or something. I don't know. But the point is that a modest uniform has to be on the same day. It has to be counted by a certain time. If that's the kind of reform you want, okay. But if you say I'm federalizing it, we should take it over. That flies in the face of the Constitution itself. We have 50 state elections run by the states themselves. And those elections can have generalized regulations coming from Congress. We have a federal election commission. And mostly the Supreme Court has had all kinds of decisions on what they can and cannot do. And so, for example, they've been trying, and it's mostly these election laws are about election financing, campaign donations, things like that. And is that a matter of free speech? Now we've got a whole constitutional issue. Can you shut down interest groups from spending all the money they want to spend when you limit the amount of money spent in elections? The Supreme Court bashed that idea back, saying, no. That's a violation of someone's free speech rights when you say you can't spend on elections and you're including private organizations. Now, the campaign itself, this seems to me a distinction without a real difference. When it comes to Mr. X, the candidate's own expenditures, okay, they can limit and regulate and have disclosure rules. See, that's the other thing. I wouldn't be opposed to campaign disclosure, donor disclosure rules for the candidate himself. But bear in mind, all of these interest groups, whether they're labor unions or the gun rights group, they're spending really the TV commercials, all kinds of things. But that's been the focus so far of federal election regulations. And the Supreme Court comes down hard and parses what they can and can't do, even when it comes to expenditures on campaigns. And rules like, the Democrats wanted under Biden were an attempt, in effect, to say the states can't, in effect, have voter ID laws. Now the Republicans come in and say, well, they mandate voter ID laws. But in both cases, now get this, what thwarts both parties from doing that? The Senate filibuster, a 200-year-old tradition in the Senate that forces a 60-vote majority. The Republicans do not have 60 votes. It's hard for any one party to ever have 60 votes. You have to get members of the other party to jump on board. And on partisan matters like this, it makes it nearly impossible for the party that even has the majority in the Senate to change this. But Mr. Trump has joined in the Democrat. The filibuster is a relic of the slavery era, which it is not, by the way. But the point is, Mr. Trump is jumping on this bandwagon to destroy what I think of as an important American political institution, the Senate filibuster, so that we can break through all that and federalize the elections. I think that's what he's hinting at here. With Trump, of course, it's hard to.
Well, you hit on something important, because Congress can alter the elections, not the president. But Trump was unusually candid, I would say. At this prayer breakfast the other day.
Yes.
Just so, what he says here, they rigged the second election. I had to win it. I needed it for my ego. This is during his a speech referring to the 2020 election. He also said, "I would have had a bad ego for the rest of my life. Now, I have a really big ego. Beating these lunatics was incredible." He literally ties winning elections to his self-worth. And that, to me, speaks to the real motivation that we have. Now, Trump said this, Jim. I want to go through a few of the things that he said. He called into the Dan Bongino show, and this is where this stuff comes from, but
Yeah.
and maybe some other places. But he said this, quote, "Remember, the states are merely an agent for the federal government. In counting and tabulating the votes, they must do what the federal government, as represented by the President of the United States, tells them," and then you get the all caps, "for the good of our country to do."
That's totally upside down.
Can you
In every
imagine
way,
the
that's
founders
totally upside down.
here that the states are agents of the federal government?
They are
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Our whole government began as a confederation, a union of states.
Yes.
The states retained their distinct jurisdiction. That used to be something that Republicans believed in, that the states retain their unique and distinct jurisdictions, and that the federal government can't encroach upon those jurisdictions. Now, to a large extent, we've lost that. Again, I blame the Supreme Court and decades-long decisions. But the point is, the federal government is not the federal government. You got it backwards. The federal government is but a servant and an agent of the state governments. Okay, so first he's conceptually got the American constitutional system completely upside down. And then, still worse, he arrogates to the president this power. No. They created by law an independent thing called the Federal Elections Commission, which is supposed to be like the Federal Reserve Board with monetary policy, an independent, quasi-judicial, in this case, agency that decides things, not you, Mr. President. And the regulations, insofar as they're even valid, come from Congress, not from the President of the United States. What he makes it sound like is the states are my servants because I'm the president. No, sir. You are the he's talking about getting the entire thing upside down, backwards, and inside out. You are the servant of the states. The whole federal government is. And in terms of being the president, you have to faithfully execute the laws, and only the laws, that Congress passes. They get to make the rules, Congress. All legislative powers, says the Congress, says the Constitution, are vested in the Congress. Mr. President, you have the duty to make sure that the laws that Congress passes are faithfully executed. So you are but the executor, faithful executor of what the instructions Congress gives to you. He's got it all backwards.
Well, surprise, surprise. So this Representative Brian Steele of Wisconsin, Steil, S-T-E-I-L. He's introduced this Make Elections Great Again Act, the MEGA Act. And what he wants to do, he wants to require all states to check citizenship and have ID. But then he wants to limit mail-in voting, that ballots have to be in on the day that they're, by election day, they have to be in, as opposed to postmarked before election day. They have to arrive by election day. And he wants to get rid of ranked choice voting. I don't know what that's all about.
There, I think we're going too far, sir. The way, the times, places, and manner is chosen by the states. So here, in fact, the Supreme Court might even push back on this. You can't. I am disturbed by the idea of telling states how they run elections, whether they're partisan, whether they're ranked choice. That kind of stuff is precisely the kind of thing that states should have the discretion in doing. Now, if you want to say prove citizenship in an election for a federal office, there's an argument for that. But you know something? The thing that Trump is recently talking about, in the 2020 election, which he is sure and he keeps asserting he won and was stolen from him, they made several arguments back then. But among the weakest was that illegal aliens voting made a difference. In Fulton County, Georgia, they made a detailed audit, and they found that exactly 9 votes of an election that was thousands, a difference of thousands and thousands and thousands of votes, that exactly 9 illegals actually may have had votes cast improperly. 9. So, and in Michigan, they did an audit to see if there were illegal aliens who made a difference in voting. Once more, they found that it didn't even come. I mean, it's a speck. It lost in a vast eternity of what might have made, and it could not have made a difference. But Mr. Trump is now saying illegal aliens are the ones that made the look, sir. That accusation about the 2020 election was among your weakest allegations. In Detroit and in Atlanta, they actually did audits on this and have conclusively shown that illegal immigrants voting did not make any difference whatever to the outcome. So he's obsessing on something that has been affirmatively disproven about these elections.
You know, I personally don't mind. I don't, and this, like Democrats with this pushback against ID requirements, I don't have an issue with people being required to carry ID to vote. It's like that in all advanced countries, or most anyways. I don't see the issue, and I think
most
that
people want it.
Yeah,
most minorities, most African Americans, most Hispanics, most Democrats want voter ID. So here Trump is screwing up, stepping on his own dick here. I don't think his dick's that big, but here he is stepping on his own dick when it comes to an issue he might have the political oomph to get past, and he's now making up absurd assertions about it, when in fact he's got a political issue that he could at least help him in the election. If he couldn't get it passed through Congress this year, he could at least make it a campaign issue that could help Republicans. But no, he's got to actually, ruin the thing by saying crazy ass stuff about it. He's really undermining what is something that Americans seem to agree on. Look, if you need ID to, buy cigarettes or alcohol, and I do think there should be laws about protecting minors, but if you need ID to buy cigarettes or alcohol,
right, then
surely voting, it's not racist. They did pass a voter ID law, by the way, in Georgia, and they called it Jim Crow. The Democrats are awful on this too. That was Jim Crow too, but guess what? Minority voting went up. It didn't go down. It's racist to think that African Americans would have a harder time getting an ID.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Yeah. I'm not opposed to it. I think that a big part of Trump's motivation here is as of now, things can change, but the numbers are not looking good for the Republicans. I believe. Let me make sure. Let me pull this up, because I think it's pretty important. If I can just find it here. Okay, the latest Fox News poll, this is from Yahoo News, conducted from January 23rd to 26th, found that if the midterms were held today, 52% of voters would back the Democratic candidate in their House district, and 46% would back the Republican. This is interesting. That 52% is the highest level of support Fox has ever recorded for either party. And for Trump, I think he understands if the Democrats take back the House, he's getting impeached.
I don't think it'll result in a conviction, but it'll result in
more
impeachment votes and more impeachment investigations.
Yeah. Well, here's the interesting thing, because, I know it's in the Constitution what it requires for conviction impeachment, but if they keep pushing to get rid of the filibuster, let's not be surprised if they start pushing for an amendment to getting rid of the 2/3 of the Senate requirement on impeachment.
For impeachments, yeah.
I mean, for conviction, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. It only takes a majority in the House to make the accusation, but that then calls for a trial in the Senate. And when it's the president, the chief justice, and it would require a constitutional amendment, unlike the filibuster. So that's hard. Again, to get a constitutional amendment, that requires the consent of 3/4 of the states. Good luck there. But you're absolutely right. It is dangerous to even go down this path. But he ignored the criminal charges. He ignored the impeachments when he was with Trump 1.0. I think what he's really concerned about is other things as well. You know, the thing is, he will, as most presidents do, after this midterm election of their second term, they become what's known as a lame duck, because everyone is now looking to, well, what's coming in the future? What's coming in the future? And your political power wanes. So the truth of the matter is, if his real political oomph is in the first 2 years, and you know, what did they say when Obama lost his first big midterm election? This wasn't an election; it was a restraining order. And he's afraid, I think, of a restraining order that would make anything, including budget deals. Now, get this: he would have to negotiate budget deals with a Democrat House for sure.
Yeah.
Then,
Jim, I got to say, Jim, I disagree with you a little bit here. I do think he's concerned about impeachment. And I don't think it's because he fears removal from office. I think it's his ego can't handle it, that he views it as a blight on him.
well, listen to what he says. My ego couldn't handle the loss of this election. So his ego is epistemologically, that's a fancy word, I know, but psychoepistemologically, in his head, the way he decides the truth and falsehood of things, the way he believes things, is affected by his psychology. Now, I think objective truth can be achieved. People can put their psychological issues aside and acquire truth. Otherwise, we couldn't have the knowledge to build a bridge or land on the moon. So I think objective knowledge is possible, right? But is psychological distortion very common? And is Mr. Trump in effect confessing that he is subjective, that subjective distortion affects his judgment about believing things? So in his own mind, he may actually have convinced himself, whatever the evidence on the other side is, that he won that election, because now he's latching on to perhaps the weakest argument he made from 2020, that illegal aliens made the difference in the voting in Atlanta and Detroit. They've done audits, Mr. Trump. Really good objective evidence exists on this. That did not and could not have made the difference, but he's latching onto that because of the voter ID. See, he has to connect the dots here as well. Voter ID, so I have to show that illegal aliens made the difference. No, to get your voter ID law, you've already got plenty of public support out there. You don't need to make up BS claims that assuage your ego. But he'll make the BS claim that assuages his ego, maybe even psychologically having convinced himself of it, in order to get this law through that people already support. It's
I guess
crazy.
he's, again said that he'll accept elections if they're fair. And by fair, he always means if he wins. And this isn't, by the way, first of all, it was in his personal life as well. But even in the 2016 primaries, they asked him, will you accept the Republican nominee? And he says, if I'm treated fairly.
If I'm treated
it's
fairly.
always if it's fair, and it's
By
always it's unfair if he loses. So
obviously it's unfair if he loses.
Yeah. So Rock, thanks for the $10. Rock from CA. He says, I've been listening to documentaries on Machiavelli lately. I think he's wrong, but his analysis has truth. Is studying him useful for understanding how the political class thinks? So there's more controversy about Machiavelli than I think probably is normally understood about what he actually was doing with his writing, whether he was serious, whether he's really a classical liberal. There's things about that. But yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a historical work. He was advising I believe the Pope, if I'm not mistaken,
Cesare Borgia, the son of the Pope.
The
son
Medici.
of the Pope.
They were Medicis, right?
Well, no. They were Borgia. Well, he came from Florence, and Machiavelli was initially an advisor to the Medicis. You're absolutely right. When he wrote The Prince, he was had already been an advisor to the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI, Cesare Borgia, whom he called the ideal prince. And this guy was the guy who basically conquered central Italy to create the Papal States and put them under the Pope's rule. Now, this guy was notoriously unscrupulous. He put down the great families of Italy, like the Orsinis and Colonna and so forth, to give the Pope the political power over central Italy. Now, Machiavelli represents a great secularization of political thought. He was part of the Renaissance in the sense that he was trying to be realistic, reality-based, And so people take his, advice, when is it okay to lie kind of thing, because it's definitely not deontological in the way he approaches these subjects. On the other hand, was it a great step towards secularizing political science? Yeah, I would say that as well. Is he, and he wasn't unaware of morality. It was just that he thinks that good princes will do, he's sort of like the European Sun Tzu in politics when it,
Jim, I want to kill you right now. You stole my thunder. What I was going to say is that in reading Machiavelli, I don't find him to be quite as cutthroat as Sun Tzu in The Art of War, but it's a very, very similar dynamic. And even in the modern, the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. So I was going to follow you with that. I was going to make a big splash, but no, you have to hog all the glory. And, wasn't enough that you knew the Borgia and the this and the that, but you had to come with this now about, he's the European Sun Tzu. So thank you, Jim.
I'm sorry for my
go ahead.
I'm sorry for my comprehensive knowledge of world history. I'm sorry for my brilliance. No, but you're right. But think about it, people. When it comes to force, when it comes to war, and back in those days, politics, it's not like normal business practices or in my private relationships. We're talking about a world of force, and in those days, they didn't have an idea of individual rights. And so a good prince just marches over and does the practice, deceives when he needs to deceive, marches over when he's got the upper hand. So it was, let's put it this way, an attempt to make practical and realistic politics, and at least in his analysis of it. But I would recommend people read Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince. But think about it. Learn a little bit about the history of Cesare Borgia, whom he called the ideal prince.
I call Jim Valiant the ideal prince.
My name is Valiant.
So Race Jacobson for the $5, Race, thank you so much. And thank you, Race, by the way, for all you do for the show with your wonderful thumbnails. He says, people forget about the spoiler effect. Joe Jorgensen got more votes than could have ever possibly been stolen. You do have the spoiler effect. Yes, Race.
Yeah, absolutely. That's more important than, say, illegal aliens voting, making a difference. No, it's these little, third-party candidates. And in the United States of America, we have unlike parliamentary systems where they have multiple parties that can be viable and then coalitions within the parliament, actually. We have, because of our, it takes a majority of electors to clearly elect a president. This tends to polarize America into a two-party system. And because we have a two-party system, but that doesn't exclude people, third parties, but states do their best, and this I absolutely oppose. And here I would back the Capitalist Party's quest to get these state laws that prevent third parties from having any real viability. They have these absurd requirements for third-party candidates. In any case, and that's something I think maybe federal regulations could step in on, but I'm not sure, because the manner of elections is determined by the states. But in any event, we have a polarized two-party system in America as opposed to parliamentary systems. But it's still, nonetheless, these third parties, these lesser party or independent candidates that can be spoilers, even if they only get 1 or 2% of the vote.
So I think that what Rock Chartrand has done here, and thank you for the $2, I think he was going through a Rolodex of some sort. And he was thinking, what can I come up with that only Valiant will know and Liebowitz won't know? He tried with Machiavelli, and I knew the Sun Tzu stuff. So now he's gone to Thucydides or whatever the hell his name is. Thucydides, and he wants to know of our opinion on Thucydides relative to Machiavelli. Unfortunately, I've never read this chap, so I'm going to turn this one over to Prince Valiant.
Thucydides was an ancient Greek historian.
I knew that.
And he came after Herodotus. Okay, let's start with
here we go. Listen, okay, he came after Herodotus. Wonderful. Anything else you want to tell us, Jim? Let's get deep into the Peloponnesian War. Maybe we can also get into the destruction of the Hermes, if you'd like to.
No, we don't have to go that far. But, to do history, to do military and political history kind of makes you a political scientist and a theorist, and your opinions will bleed through in terms of this. And Thucydides did very much, in one sense, appreciate the go for the throat tactics of certain ancient Greeks in terms of defeating the Persians, for example. So, Thucydides is as much a political thinker as he is a historian. Does that answer? I don't even know what the thrust of the question was.
No, because you're just showing off at this point.
Yeah, I am.
What was his name? Alcibiades. That's who.
Alcibiades or Alcibiades.
He's the one. He destroyed the Hermes, right? Him and his pals.
Him and his pals. They were pretty, but they were up against an army of what was it? 100. Even if the numbers are exaggerated, a vast Persian army was coming against the Greeks, and they had to do everything by land and sea. And they built a bridge across from Turkey into Europe so that they could get all these massive troops across. And so by all the different tactics that these brilliant Greek generals used were, back against the wall kind of tactics.
Okay, this is what Rock wants to know. He wants to know how Thucydides and Machiavelli are similar and how they are different. So blame Jim for that one. I don't want any blame. He's the one that decided to show off and not just answer the question. Go ahead, Jim.
Well, in one sense, you could say Thucydides was, that's a very interesting question. It would take a giant essay of comparison. Both men the Greeks were, what Machiavelli represents is, as I say, a secularization, an attempt to impose what we would call a common sense, reality-based analysis of politics. The Greeks already had that context. The Greeks, their heads weren't in the clouds like medieval Christians were, as it were. And so when they discussed history, when they discussed politics, they were already kind of grounded in that way. But on the other hand, I would say Thucydides might be said to be someone who had more of ethics in the back of his mind in some ways. He was able to criticize even Greek rulers, but do recognize it was a backs against the walls kind of situation for the Greeks. If I go any further, it would be like a giant essay on details, and I think that we would lose viewers. So
we don't want that. We'll have Rock. Rock will be in the audience, and that'll be it, and we'll be hit. I read a book, Jim, one time called Fathers and Sons in Athens. It was a really, really good book about family life and some disturbing stuff as well, but it was still a good book. And I actually have Thucydides' book. I had it when I was in prison, and it was always there, and wait a second, I didn't have it. It was in the library, and every time I would go to the library, I would see it, but there was always something that I wanted to read more than that. But back to Machiavelli, Jim. Just we had a few minutes left. Would he be the originator as far as European thought goes of the whole realpolitik stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. He put political analysis on a secular basis, and he's often called the father of modern political science as a result. He certainly, one cannot but say that he made it a much more secular, a much more scientific approach. Now, one can criticize his approach in terms of applying morality, and I think that's what kind of Rock was getting at. Thucydides had a moral sense, but it wasn't a Christian moral sense. And I think, and Machiavelli was having to fight back, even though he was working for the son of a pope, at some point, praising certainly the son of a pope. He was trying to push back on this rationalist, Platonic, religious, dictated view. He knew. You see what was happening in Renaissance politics in Europe. The nation state is unifying. The nation states of Western Europe are coming into some unity, and through very what we might say Machiavellian means.
Rock says, what I got from Machiavelli is that he's a master manipulator, something close to what Trump wishes he could be. See, this is where you'd want one of the Borgia up there on a debate stage with Trump, and they could say, Donald, I knew Machiavelli. Machiavelli was a friend of mine. Donald, you're no Machiavelli.
And you know Machiavelli.
So let me just, Jim, smile for the camera, and let me just see if there's they're very impressed with your memory here in the chat. James Thunderstealer Valiant is a nickname that you're getting. Before you wrap up, I just wanted to, somebody mention this, and I agree. I think that if the Dems take power, it'd be a woeful mistake to start impeachment stuff, because he's not going to get convicted. You're just going to expend all types of resources and political capital on this. And that's when his defenders come out in droves. When they feel that he's being attacked or victimized by the establishment, that's when they defend him. That's probably what landed him back in the White House.
And wouldn't it be smarter for them to attach themselves to certain issues they might get Republican help on and get through both houses, and make Mr. Trump do embarrassing vetoes, or maybe even be able to overcome his vetoes?
Get rid of tariffs. Get rid of tariffs.
That's what comes to mind.
Yeah.
Now, that would require that Democrats, even the squad, would have to agree, well, free trade is better. But it's astonishing how the change in politics makes interesting bedfellows, how Republicans suddenly aren't so keen on gun rights, and how Democrats today aren't so keen on tariffs. So, but that's how politics should work. When you find an issue where maybe we can work together on, and you see, that's the thing about the federal election law that the Republicans are working on now. Voter ID. Democrats are in favor of it when you look at the polls. That would really be embarrassing for a lot of Democrats in Congress, for them to have to go back to their voters and say, I know that the majority of you wanted this to happen, but I voted against it. Find issues where you could really make it uncomfortable for the other side. That's what the Democrats ought to do. Don't make it easy for Mr. Trump, because you're absolutely right. Because then, I can just hear it already now. The Trump people coming out and saying, you see how crazy they are, ... And that could only entrench their attitudes about Mr. Trump, and get nothing done either, and fail to focus the issues for the next election either. But then again, I grew up in a different culture politically.
Well, you had Coolidge to vote for. We don't
Not that old.
All right, Jim, take us out. Give us the capitalist thought of the day.
Oh, golly. It is not, capitalism cannot depend upon political leaders having sound psychologies. Capitalism depends on the rule of law, not of men, because what you're going to have sometimes are men with psychological issues. And I don't want to wake up every morning wondering whether or not the practical effect of my life in any way hinges upon the psychology of one man, or even a committee of men. That's why we need constitutions. That's why we need principles. And that's why it shouldn't be a rule of men, but of laws. And capitalism is the system that absolutely depends upon being principled, limiting government, and insisting on the rule of law.
Well done, sir. Okay, we will be back, of course, on Monday. I anticipate Mark being back, but I've anticipated him being back before, and it didn't happen. But this time he's told me he'll be here. Tomorrow, remember to tune in. We've got Self-Made Soul going on. If my memory serves me correct, we're going to be discussing Spinoza and psychology. We've also got Capitalist Corner Patreon tomorrow. We are going to discuss our cultural value deprivation, a great essay by Ayn Rand. And also, remember, 2:30 today, we've got Everyday Ethics. Lovely Persephone will be there. I'll do something, I suppose. It's all going to be great. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, please, folks. And what's the question? The question is, what are you doing for your weekend? What are you going to do to unwind, let loose over the weekend? let me know. Go to YouTube and answer the question. Persephone's shaking her head, so I'm going to let her. You got something better, lady?
No, that's a great question.
All right. Everybody say goodbye for the weekend. We will see you on Monday.
And
check your premises.
there we go.